When you think about a good weapon in combat initiation, you think of the sword, the slingshot, maybe even the Super Ball. However, the trowel probably doesn't come to mind, and yet it's secretly one of the craziest tools in the player's arsenal, and today's topic on the channel. You guys really liked my Super Ball analysis, and the summon video is still taking a while, so I figured I'd drop something else in the meantime. So in this video, we're going over everything you need to know about the trowel, including its upgrades, why they're good, and relevant synergies. Let's get into the video. Let's start simple. What does the trowel actually do on its own? Before we get into the absurdity of fragmentation, we have to break down the basics. Trowel is a secondary weapon which constructs a 12 stud long, 2 stud wide, and 5 stud high wall when used, with a 3-second cooldown. The range for constructing a wall with a trowel is actually pretty generous, at a 200 stud radius ever since the recent update. However, this is where its stats go from simple to complex, since there's actually multiple ways you can deal damage with a trowel. If you build a wall on an enemy, they'll take 250 damage and get launched into the air. Additionally, your walls can fragment upon certain conditions being met, typically explosions, causing parts of the wall to be redirected towards nearby enemies, with fragmented trowel bricks usually dealing around 150 damage when not accounting for imbues. Killing an enemy in either of these ways will award the player with the brick style bonus, which gives the player 50 more style points than the usual kill style bonus. Lastly, you can trowel jump by placing a wall under you, launching yourself into the air in the process. That's a lot of hidden power packed into what most players think is a niche secondary weapon. What makes these stats really good is how much control they can give you if you know what you're doing. You can drop a wall on an enemy for raw damage, sure, but you can also place walls to reposition yourself, kite enemies around it, block projectiles, and when those wall fragments start flying, the style box lights up with bricked bonuses like confetti. I thought I'd also note that Trowel's placement cooldown decrease from 5 to 3 helps its versatility out big time, since it lets you pull off trowel shenanigans more frequently and just makes the weapon feel more consistent. All of this makes for an extremely versatile secondary weapon that can feel like a primary weapon if given the right build. However, I think there's something to be said about Trowel's wide variety of interactions with enemies. Heavily implied, but I think I might as well note right now that everything that I'm about to mention also applies to the walls you can make with a hammer. I think everyone who plays combat initiation knows you can block projectiles with a trowel wall, and explosive projectiles can fragment a wall. However, the weapon can pull off way more than that. While bobbies will usually get one shot by a trowel wall, they'll also get disarmed in the process, netting you some more style. Vagabond gets hard countered by the trowel if you know what you're doing, as setting up a wall on Vagabond will usually disarm him. And making Vagabond hit a trowel wall while he performs his slam attack will not just stun him, but give the player the tricked style bonus too. If you're having trouble with disarming contraps by attacking their helmet so you can parry them, a well-placed trowel can instantly disarm them too. Lastly, smiths can be insta-killed by a wall if one is thrown up when they charge at you, giving the player the faceplant style bonus if this happens. Not an extremely large list of enemy counters, but a list notable enough to take into consideration nonetheless. However, there's an upgrade you can get for the trowel that amps up its fragmentation potential on top of adding a plethora of new interactions, which is a must-have for any trowel build. That's right, it's time to talk about the hammer. The hammer turns an already fun gameplay mechanic into a dopamine machine. We've seen what happens when enemies run into your walls. Now let's go over what happens when you bring the hammer down on them. While the placement cooldown doesn't change, everything else does. Your wall placement range is lowered to 100, but believe me when I say that this is one of the only downsides of this weapon. Your walls can now be upgraded and stored by pressing E on a viable wall, and replaced within a 200 stud range by pressing E again. Upgrading a wall is simple. Keep clicking a hammer wall with your hammer equipped and it'll upgrade a stage. This can be done twice per wall. The damage you deal upon placing a stage 1 hammer wall is only 200. However, replacing a stage 2 or 3 wall will deal a whopping 400 and 600 damage respectively. Although this isn't free, you'll have to spend 150 ticks at a shop to upgrade your trowel into a hammer. As stage 2s and especially stage 3 hammer walls cover up a lot of ground, you can get a horde of enemies under said walls for an easy multi-kill skill bonus. And since the larger stages have more bricks on their walls, they'll fragment better, dealing absurd damage if you kite a lot of enemies to a wall. It's hard to overstate how ridiculous this feels in practice. Upgrading walls into massive 600 damage slabs and then making them explode into a storm of bricks is fun. Every upgraded wall you place has the potential to send your style bar into extreme rank. And if you line things up just right, you'll walk away with more style than any other weapon can dream of giving you. But what if I told you the hammer was more than just a wall printer, because we haven't even gone over its second way of using it. Pocketing projectiles is what cranks the hammer to 11. When I said pressing E on a viable wall is just how you store walls, I lied, because you can also store pretty much any projectile with a hammer too. In a loadout without a means of parrying, this is huge since you have a means of reflecting projectiles. And when sending back an enemy projectile with a hammer, it isn't just dealing the same damage, but most of the time 2.5 times more than what it would have dealt if it was simply parried. Now, while this isn't a conventional means of getting out of a bullet hell scenario, it is good at clearing out a group of enemies if you get your hands on a powerful projectile. Storing your own bomb and then launching it straight into the air actually preps it for a nuclear reaction if you're into that too. You can even store your own zombies with this thing. There's no time limit on how long you can store something with your hammer, which means you can hold on to something, like a 1.5k damage cannon shot, and then use it later when you have a group of enemies rushing you for some easy style gain. What makes this absurd is the sheer flexibility. Due to there being no timer on a stored projectile or wall, you can choose when and where to cash in your stored item, rewarding players who plan ahead and then actually execute on said plan. It allows for some of the funniest and flashiest plays in the game, and I love it. If you're at this point in the video, I just want to say thanks for watching. If you like what you're seeing, feel free to leave a like on the video so more people can see it. If you want to know when more content drops, feel free to subscribe as well. The summon guide video is almost done, and if you want to know when that drops, you'll want to subscribe. Synergy time, since what you wear can greatly change how your walls work. While there isn't anything that's going to be making your walls larger, there is a set of accessories which improves your fragmentations across the board, and what I recommend you equip when making a Trowel build: TBC Hard Hat and Headrow. For 2 budget points, TBC Hard Hat buffs everything that has to do with a Trowel branch in the form of a 30% brick/fragmentation damage bonus, a 25% cooldown speed for building walls and pocketing, a 20% sentry damage bonus, and a 50% wrench damage bonus. You do suffer a harsh minus 20% damage penalty to everything else, however, but since you're designing your loadout to reliably throw fragmentations off, more on that later, this shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now, while this is great, there is a hat that I would argue provides a much better utility for Trowel builds at only 1 budget point, and that hat is Headrow. What it does is simple. Remember that 3-second cooldown before you can place another wall? Well, if one of your walls is fragmented, that cooldown is entirely removed, letting you work your way out of projectile spam so long as some of them are explosive, or with the right loadout, spam fragmentation since your placement cooldown is reset after 1. As for obtaining these accessories, TBC Hard Hat is obtained from the Master Builder achievement, requiring 500 kills from each branch of the Trowel, so good luck with that. Fortunately, Headrow is way more lenient with its requirements, only needing you to kill 150 enemies by setting up walls, something you can easily achieve with the help of hammer storage and a stage 3 wall. The Trowel shines brightest when paired with other weapons. After all, I wouldn't be praising an accessory which resets your wall cooldown upon a fragmentation if there weren't a multitude of on-command options to fragment a Trowel wall at the player's disposal. In this section, we'll be going over the most valuable weapons to bring alongside your Trowel or hammer when making a Trowel build, those being the Bazooka and Subspace Tripmine. Bazooka. There is no other weapon in the game that is more reliable at fragmenting than the Bazooka, full stop. With a clip of 5 rockets, you can quickly fragment a wall, build a new wall, and then repeat the process again. While it's not the best at dealing damage to enemies if you aren't directly hitting them, you don't have to when the main use case of it in a Trowel build is just to blow up your walls with it. It's also really good for movement since you can rocket jump with it, giving yourself a reliable escape plan in case you get into some serious trouble. Learn how to chain rocket jumps to fly across the map with ease. Always go for this weapon in a Trowel build. You're at a serious opportunity cost if you're not. Subspace Tripmine. Another really good method of fragmenting, this one being a proximity-based bomb that has the benefit of activating upon either you or an enemy being near it. Good at fragmenting a wall from a distance, you can combine it with the previously mentioned Bazooka to not just fragment a wall but create a super reaction too if you shoot it with said Bazooka. Plus, if you throw a sword or hammer storage into the mix, you've got yourself a nuclear reaction set up on top of your absurd fragmentation tech. Filler weapons, which can kill. Of course, Trowel's weapon synergies aren't just the 2 explosive weapons. It has some other more niche weapon synergies. If you're a fan of the Scatter Blaster, its full charge plasma shot can not just fragment your walls, but then imbue your wall fragments with plasma, massively increasing the damage you can dish out. The freeze ray can also fragment a wall, so long as it's a charge shot that hits the wall. This form of fragmenting will also imbue your wall fragments with ice. You can redirect the thrown Super Ball, Cannonball, or even Ninja Star at a nearby enemy if it hits a wall, awarding you with the redirected style bonus in the process. The BB gun's alt fire can ricochet off a trowel wall at no cost to the total ricochet count. However, hammer walls will deplete ricochets. You can also perform a technique called a railgun, which consists of setting up 2 trowel walls, odd hammer walls, and then firing an extremely precise BB gun alt fire at the top of the trowel wall not facing you. If it works, you'll have a constant beam of damage on one enemy between the walls. This is obviously not viable for general play because, well, enemies can move, but it is an interesting piece of tech, so I decided to include it nonetheless. Of course, it's not just weapons. The right gear can make the trowel even better too. As gears are partially random unless you opt for the seated gears modifier, it's important to know when you get a good gear for your trowel build if one ever shows up without the seated gears modifier in play. We have 3 to go over, so let's get started.
Slateskin Potion.
If you have basic competence with this gear, you've probably been yelling at me to cover the slate skin during this whole video due to how much of a game changer it is with your walls. Performing a slam with a trowel will increase the wall's size based on how far you fell. It's as simple as that. However, Hammer's interaction with the Slateskin Potion is anything but simple. Performing a slam with a hammer will produce either a stage 4, 5, or 6 wall depending on how far you fell. And yes, you can still pocket these walls, and yes, they're even better when fragmented compared to a stage 3 wall. With a bomb also in tow, you can perform one of my favorite combos, being a nuclear reaction bomb slam which flings you back up into the air, followed by a hammer slam, which usually creates a stage 5 or 6 wall if you're fast enough when equipping your hammer, followed by fragmenting said tower for even more massive crowd control damage. This is usually going to be enough damage to kill most greater enemies such as cannons and contraps, so if everything lines up and you're feeling silly, go for it. With a stage 4 wall specifically, you can perform what is called a stable redirection cannon with ninja stars. However, I'm not that familiar with this strategy, and just like the railgun technique, this is highly situational, so it's not the best game plan for general play. All in all, you want this gear in a trial build no matter what.
Grappling Hook.
The Grappling Hook has some niche, but still useful tech with your walls, as said walls are compatible with the Grappling Hook, making them double as easy transportation. That being said, you're probably going to be fragmenting your walls right after setting them up, so it's not the best tech to use with Trowel and its corresponding upgrade.
Reflector.
The Reflector can actually fragment your walls too, in case you need another method of fragmenting. Yeah, that's really it for Reflector for its synergies with Trowel and Hammer. Of course, this wouldn't be a trowel video if I didn't talk about the wrench. Unlike the hammer, which is more or less a direct upgrade of the trowel, the wrench goes all in on offense. I'm going to be keeping this explanation extremely simplified, as the main intention of this video is to go over trowel and hammer, but still go over the wrench to a degree. Upgrading your trowel into a wrench takes 200 ticks, but in return your walls are turned into a single sentry which locks onto enemies. You can build a sentry with its alt fire, as its main fire is instead allocated to tossing your wrench. The sentry is a set amount of health which can be reduced by enemies attacking it on top of slowly depleting over time, but you can repair its health by throwing a wrench at it. Using the wrench's alt fire, if a sentry is already on the field, will instead detonate the current sentry. There's also a bunch of imbues you can tack on a sentry, but once again, extremely simplified explanation. Someone in the comments can probably go over it though. A thrown wrench can also parry things if you want to be stylish. What makes the wrench worth mentioning is that it fundamentally shifts the role of your build, since you're no longer dependent on other pieces of your loadout for fragmenting walls. Instead of building and fragmenting walls, you're applying constant offensive output with a sentry. While it's not as flashy as the hammer, it gives you a more traditional DPS weapon at the cost of losing the huge style bonuses from fragmentation. Also, pairing with a wrench of all things is cool. What I love about the trowel is that it's a weapon that forces you to rethink how you play combat initiation. It's not just about raw damage, unless you're using it like that, but why would you do that? It's about building a loadout, timing your fragmentations just right, and turning everything the game throws at you into a weapon, since a lot of projectiles in the game can not just cause fragmentation, but be stored by a hammer. If you slept on Trowel before, give it another try and let me know what you think in the comments. See ya.